Hey folks, welcome back. We're here today with many time guest Alexander Love. Welcome back, Alexander. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Forrest. Really glad to be here with you and everyone who's listening.
I know we have thrown out a couple ideas for topics and territories we might explore today. Before we get into that, as always, just want to invite everyone to take a breath with us. And if you've been here before, you know this is a field first podcast. What that means is we invite you to notice not only the words and topics and themes Alexander and I are talking about, but also where we're speaking to you from. The invitation is to relax, to allow yourself to be resourced by and even recreated from the field of consciousness this podcast is sourced from. So, welcome. It's good to have you here. Alexander, I know we're going to freestyle an advertisement for your upcoming program, your level one Lumina Process program that begins in April. And I haven't taken your Lumina Process program, but I have worked with you as a practitioner. I've done, at this point, I imagine dozens of sessions with you where you've held space for me and supported me. And I just want to speak to the capacity that you have. I there's only a couple people in the world that I go to these days for support, and you're one of them. So I want to give you my wholehearted testimonial. And if you're listening, just know Alexander has been unbelievably helpful for me. I've experienced you, Alexander, as incredibly skillful, bringing a certain kind of love and holding that is really helped me heal, uh, become more fully myself. I also really appreciate your spine of light, where you stand up to me and challenge me when I'm being a jerk off or a hard headed person. And I know how many people in the community have worked with you and just rave about your work. So I want to encourage anyone and I just want to wholeheartedly endorse you and your work and the way that you support people and encourage anyone listening to check out the program that you're getting ready to share with us about.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Forrest. I really appreciate hearing all that and feeling you there. Um, yeah, I'll just say a couple things. The Lumina process is um, a modality that brings us deeply into parts work and shadow work, and it draws upon a number of different streams. It draws upon the wisdom of the Eastern wisdom from Chinese medicine and other Eastern traditions. Um, it draws upon the work of Kim Barta, who's someone that I love and adore and who has taught me so many things about shadow and life in general. It also draws upon some of the gifts of internal family systems. And then, you know, integral theory and a developmental frame is deeply woven throughout it, um, exploring and inviting us into a question around what does it mean to be an unfolding process? What does that mean for shadow? What is the purpose within pain? What are the gifts that come through embracing pain, and what might that open in relationship to wholeness? Of course, the process also includes, in some ways, most importantly, what I've learned from my clients, which sort of brings insight into some new ways we might work with parts in our inner landscape. And level one is the sort of the entry into the whole process. It's 3 months, and we take a deep dive in learning how to apply this method to our own transformation. And then if people want to keep going, then it transitions into how do we apply this to others in a um, coaching context or a mentoring context or helping relationship. So anyway, it starts from the beginning of April, and we can put a link somewhere.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. If I'm listening to our podcast right now, how might I know that this is really the opportunity for me?
Well, I think that with any sort of likely folks that are listening to this podcast are listening to a lot of podcasts and are interested in a lot of learning. And I think it really comes down to dropping in deeply and maybe getting a feel for the conversation that we have to feel if there's resonance um, with what's being spoken and um, if there's a pull. If there, there's, people can go to the link and kind of get a feel for the content and for where it's headed. But I think ultimately, with all of the things that are out there for us to learn, it really comes down to a deep inner sense of resonance and a pull or a tug towards, oh yeah, that feels like the next place that I want to play. I mean, we go super deep. We learn there's a lot of content to learn, but then also a lot of inner application and transformative possibilities, that that's what I would say.
Mhm. When you say you would invite people to drop in deeply, I wonder if you would guide us for a few moments in a dropping in.
Yeah. Why don't we drop into our heart center so you can find the middle of your chest and then just go back towards your spine until you find the sort of the midline of your body. And just notice what's there. What's it like to be a person in a body these days? And then can look a little closer and just notice that there's a little luminous flame there, like a candlelight. You might see it, you might feel it. Just noticing the warmth, the gentleness, but also the aliveness. And notice how this light is like a little magnet. And anything that wants to be drawn towards it, crinklies, contractions, exhaustions, they just get drawn right into the flame and they transmute. So it's heart alchemy. And just noticing how all of that supports the flame to become brighter and crisper and more gentle. And then from there, noticing how there's this flame, but then there's also the environment that we're in, and noticing how there's a hush and an enlivening in the space that we're soaking in, and try to feel that space that we're in along with that presence of being. Yeah.
You you all explore shadow in this Lumina Process Level One training?
Yeah, deeply. We look at the shadow of we look at the things that I guess technically aren't shadow, the aspects that we're quite aware of, but that drive us nuts and other people nuts. Um, but then we also learn how to work with these uh, aspects of the self that are more visible and more protective. Um, we explore how they can support us in going deeper into the technically the shadow, the places in us that we can't see, and learn how to go in there. And one of the unique things about the Lumina process is um, often when we're doing parts work, the focus is on the parts that look like us. So I'm with my little 6-year-old or 2-year-old or me as an infant and those kinds of things, which is really powerful and important. At the same time, um, all you could say traumatic experiences are relational. And so, if there is, for example, a young aspect of me that is lonely and hiding in a corner, when that first developed, it happened in relationship to other people being absent or other relationships that were occurring. Now, very often with parts work, what we do is we build a relationship from wholeness to the part that looks like us. And in that relationship, there's a transformative process that unfolds. It's really powerful. What I also find is that sometimes, if we build relationships with the parts in us that don't look like us, we're internalizing our entire world all of the time. Any human being that we have some significant response to or relationship with, whether it's the President of the United States or whether it's our mothers and fathers, we have places in us where those parts are there because we internalize our world and it's part of how we have it shapes our inner landscape of what it means to be a person and an identity. And some of those people we reject, some of those people we welcome. Sometimes it's both at the same time. And so what I've found is that when we engage in a process of parts work where we include looking at the parts of us that don't look like us, some really powerful things can happen. I can encounter the brother that was really mean when I was a kid. I'm just making this up. I don't have a brother, but I can encounter the brother that was really mean to me when I was a kid. And I can encounter the brother the way that I've internalized him with all of his pain, burden, but also the gifts. And just like I would do parts work with myself and a part that looks like me, I can begin doing a process with this part that is also a part of myself, but doesn't look like me, until that part can release its burdens and discover its deeper virtues, its deeper expressions of wholeness. Then that inner brother can be brought into contact with the part of me that looks like me that was harmed by that brother. And a different kind of transformative resolution can occur. It's one thing for a part to experience loving presence from deep wholeness. And that, I mean, I do that with clients all the time. It's a fantastic thing to do. But sometimes there's some relational snags where including this other aspect can be really powerful. And I find that people will start to experience sudden bouts of forgiveness and deep understanding and deep resolution when it comes to these kind of relational pains that we develop. And so I gave the example of the brother, but that can also be applied to complications with grief, meaning the grief process, losing someone, it was complicated. It's not just like my mom grew old and it was sad and she passed when the time was right and I'm sad, but it was fairly clean between us. Sometimes grief and loss has some complicated factors. And so there's ways to kind of unsnaggle all of that in some really beautiful ways.
I love what you're sharing because, as far as I'm aware, this is a lot of what makes your approach and orientation unique. And what I hear you speaking to is we have egalitarian dynamics between different parts. We have hierarchical dynamics between parts, for example, parent-child. And then we have this nested doll structure of selves, selves within selves, world within worlds. And so you're speaking to what it's like for healing dynamics to occur within a world as opposed to from outer world into inner world.
Yeah. Yeah. And, um, one of the things that this is trying to invite people into is that from one perspective, whatever I can see out there is also reflected in here. This is a way to embody that or instantiate that within a parts work methodology so that I start to see, okay, there's the actual brother out there that I can't control what he does or what he did. Okay, that's that. But then there's also the brother as archetype with his unique features and gifts and meanness. That's also something that I've taken in. And so In some traditions, when the perceived other is encountered on the inside, there's a distancing. You'll see this in some practices in internal family systems, for example, which where there's the act of I'm going to take this part of me away from the scary thing that's inside of me. Now, the thing is that part that looks like us is becoming in relationship to that whole world. And that whole world that's inside of us is actually part of us. So we're still creating separation and division by saying, the mean brother, I'm going to get away from him. It's one thing to set a boundary to the actual brother in the actual world as an act of care and agency and empowerment for oneself. But if we've internalized that, both the gifts and the the burdens. Um, I find that there's a lot of benefit in engendering embrace and turning towards. And what happens is all the burdens get released. So what we would typically think of as, well, I want to send back introjections, things that I've taken on that are um, not really mine to take on. We still take care of that. That's essential. But we can release that while still retaining the fundamental essence of goodness that was inside the mean brother that got twisted into shadow and then was sort of inflicted upon the person in some sort of a dynamic.
Right. So just to say that, just to say exactly what you said in a slightly different way, and if I'm not doing that, correct me. But oftentimes, if I've internalized, let's say, an abusive mother, a
Mhm,
parts work practice might be release the abusive mother
mhm,
entirely. That's actually that entire voice, that entire part, that entire psycho-energetic imprint is an introject. And so we're going to let it go entirely, be in the emptiness of where that was and see what shows up from here.
mhm.
You're saying that's an option. We could do that.
And
And
I do it with clients when it's when it seems appropriate. It's a beautiful thing what you're describing. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And another possibility here that I hear you speaking to is actually the mother can stay. It's the abusive notes,
Yeah.
the abusive notes that can, by being in relationship with them in a Lumina process, the abusive notes, the pain that that kind of abuse is sourced from, can be liberated from the internalized mother. And then what we're left with is the radiant, essential,
Right.
luminous expression of the essence of the mother that we internalized.
That's right. And there's a modality that Dan Brown has done a lot of work with called the ideal parent protocol. And what people it's used for attachment patterns. And one of the things they'll do in that tradition is you visualize the perfect parent. It doesn't look like your parent. You visualize the perfect parent, and then you engage in a new attachment dynamic with them. Now, what you're describing, which I would agree is one of the things that we explore in the Lumina process, is a different way to go about healing some of those attachment patterns. But rather than bringing in a visualization of my like sort of a projection of like what a perfect parent would be, which again is a valid way of people find great benefit from doing that protocol. But what occurs here is now you see your parent as an aspect of your own inner ecology minus the pain that they were carrying from their lineage and their relationships. And now there's an opportunity to work out the conflicts directly with that aspect of wholeness now. And so then what happens is this part that's like, well, mom, you never were able to do this. And mom, you hurt me like that. And mom, this is another way that things went bad. And then that mom part of us will begin to respond with from virtue, from wholeness. And you do this process where the part of you that's holding the conflict keeps expressing the conflict, expressing the conflict. The loving mother responds from wisdom, and you keep doing that until the conflict is resolved. And then there is a process of togethering and harmonization that can happen. And so now not only have we helped the part of us that looks like us that has mommy issues, but we've developed a new relationship to uh, who our mother is. We can understand too, it's different than the mother in the world. She may still have her burdens and carry those things. It's not the same, it's not identical. But the way that our mother lives in us is now closer to her deeper essence, um, which I find changes everything sometimes. Um, and can be quite powerful because people start to really begin to understand. Um, if I'm giving all of my mother's pain back to her, which is very important if we need to set boundaries and learn that move. But one of the things that happens is if I'm with the part of me that looks like my mom and supporting the process from wholeness where that pain is leaving, I'm also developing a deeper understanding for who she is and how her gifts turned into whatever pain is being perpetuated. That's where sometimes a lot of forgiveness and compassion and empathy starts to arise um, in doing it that way. Yeah.
When I'm listening to you, Alexander, I feel like there's something so precious here, and I don't feel like it's quite been named yet. And I want to contact more. What is it that has you? I'm just going to say it the way it comes to me. What is it that has you so invested in this orientation and this kind of facilitation?
Um, well, I guess I wouldn't say invested because uh, when I'm working with clients, what I'm most invested in is what's emerging in the moment. And there's some times where uh, I'm offering an additional possibility, but I don't hold it like people should do this instead of those other things. Some of the other ways of working with parts that we've both talked about in this conversation that are different than what I'm describing, I probably did last week with clients. So it's not so much an investment, but what I see as um, a possibility here in how this works within a human being is there's a deeper realization that actually what is out there is also the same as what's in here. That the things that are going on out there in the world, the people that are acting in the ways that are, poorly, beautifully, whatever it is, that I can really find that in myself. It's not just my dad screwed up my life. It's that my dad is inside of me. And I have full capacity to release the aspects of my dad that are inside of me that don't serve this system. But underneath all of that, there's something beautiful and precious. There are the gifts that are underneath all the hellfire and all the contractions and distortions. And what's coming up for me more experientially in living into your question is just a sense of loving presence and gentleness in relationship to all the horrors that we find in this world. I mean, right now there's so much stuff going on. There's so many intense things that we could maybe say are tragic or um, unnecessary suffering, or there's a million ways that we can talk about this. And I'm deeply informed by some of the Eastern wisdom practices where we're trying to learn how to love everybody. Sometimes my straight spine and like calling somebody out on something or whatever it is, all of that still remains. We're not just letting everything happen and saying it's fine however it is. But how do I love the person that I'm setting a boundary with? How do I love the people that are inflicting harm that I can see the distortion and the shadow expression? But if I'm busy being reactive, I'm not as intelligent and capable as I would be as if I really literally were able to find those same qualities in myself. And this is something for people listening to this podcast, this is something that many folks have thought, like, right? This isn't new. I just have found that this practice is a way to engender that directly and repeatedly, while also being able to work out certain kinds of conflicts um, in a way that I think seems to be quite, as you said, precious.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm going, okay, so Alexander is helping people see that our inner world and our external world mirror each other. We see the world as we see ourselves. And there's a capacity building here in our inner collective and our outer collective. And even as those distinctions start to fall away, there's a capacity building for supporting the liberation of radiance, sacred world, luminous awareness from the material that that same radiant luminous awareness was a little bit more scrunched up as.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's a way to, um, one way to explore this is everything that's ever happened is literally enfolded in this moment. And we can look at it in the context of a single lifetime. Everything that's ever happened to me, everything that's ever happened to you, it's all enfolded in this moment. As I like to make a distinction between the history and the past. So usually those are understood as synonyms, but um, I consider the past as like what happened. And unless we have a time machine or something, we can't really go back. We can't change the past. Um, but the living history is altogether different, and it's the way that what happened is continually occurring and reoccurring and shaping and reshaping this moment. And there are three ways. I'm sure there's like 1,000 ways, but I'll mention three ways that living history pours into this moment or arises in this moment to shape it. One is consciously, right? I got married last week. I remember I got married last week. And so it's consciously my living history. I can feel the playfulness of the dancing, right? It's alive in me now. Then we have subconsciously. I learned how to ride a bike when I was little. I don't have to, that doesn't have to be in my conscious awareness for that aspect of my living history to move through my body as I ride a bike. It's already there. And then we have unconsciously. And this is the domain of shadow, where there's aspects of my living history that have been sealed off. Not just parts of me that are sealed off, but parts of me have been sealed off inside of a relational world that includes human and non-human aspects to it. That entire world has been sealed off. And that's also secretly shaping how I'm orienting to this moment. And so the invitation here is, to me, I love the word, Gebser, I think, has popularized this a little bit more, but the word diaphanous, which is the capacity for light to pass through something. So if you have like a silky scarf, right? It's diaphanous. The light is able to pass through. And the invitation here is that we can engage with our direct experience in such a way that our living history becomes more diaphanous. It's it's living and breathing in the present in a way that it's not hidden in the shadows, that we're walling off history, that we're walling off the sort of mammoth stream of becoming that we are part of, but that this can come more into the 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 misty liminal sort of moment here, and can be welcomed. And I think this changes how we behave. Because I mean, ultimately, I think this boils down to how does it change how I am with others? How, like, does it change how I am with my daughter? Does it change how I am with the people that I interact with? Do I become more loving, uh, more clear? Not clear like I understand stuff clearly, but like is my uh, are my deeper positive intentions and how I'm acting and interacting in the world, is there less and less of a gap between those things. And so I find that the more that we embrace our living history and bring these worlds that are filled with scars and pain and allow that to gently and lovingly come into the present, something gets liberated and there's more room for us to show up as an expression of those deeper virtues or deeper positive intentions.
And so for you, for your clients, I mean, in your own life and in testimonials and feedback you hear from folks, what are the kinds of experiential things people share that working with you and doing the Lumina process makes possible?
Well, one of the main things that I hear is that people start to learn how to access their own depth of wholeness more frequently, more consistently. Because as I was mentioning a moment ago, to me, the effectiveness of a modality is evidenced by how someone's able to show up in the world and how are they impacting their community in a different way. And I think it's important to say that because, many of us that are interested in inner work, we can get very uh, involved in doing inner processes. But I guess the question that arises for me is for the sake of what? And hopefully there's, less suffering for the person, but also hopefully there's less suffering for the people that they're in relationship with. And so one thing is that people experience more and more access to wholeness and the ability to differentiate between voices of wholeness and voices of parts, which are still part of wholeness, but when they take over, it doesn't look that way. It doesn't feel that way. Um, I'd say one more thing is that people also report having a much different relationship with the people in their lives that they previously were um, walled off from, reactive towards. Again, they still might say, hey, interacting with this person is a hard no, right? That might be an act of a healthy boundary. But the inner friction is released. So they can see them, they can love them. There's a deeper capacity for understanding, compassion, and empathy. And then when it comes to what do I do in the concrete world, I may say, no, we're not going to be interacting with each other, or it might open a doorway for a deepening and different kind of connection. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say there, but I think that's probably, yeah, probably a good two examples.
Well, and I can also chime in here in my own experience of, a couple of the things that I appreciate most working with you. One is your real attunement to the nervous system. And a lot of parts work and psychotherapy work is, I'll just say, a little bit cerebral or kind of mental.
Yeah,
And I really appreciate being with you. There's been an invitation and an encouragement to notice sensationally what's the nervous system tone of coming from our deeper being,
yeah,
coming from wholeness, being able to notice in the moment, wait a minute, what just happened?
yeah. Yeah, I think, as with any learning, I think there's usually multiple influences that lead to, the realization of something. But I think in my life, some of what I learned from Kim Barta really helped me touch in on um, the value of a full bodied beinged experience that, okay, if I'm in the context of wholeness, for example, okay, well, I have the idea of wholeness, so I could say like, well, from the voice of wholeness, like I'm really curious and like everything is interesting, right? So there's a cognitive linguistic wholeness. But then, okay, what's the sensory experience of that? Oh, there's like a little bit of a frothing aliveness and a little luminosity. And it's like, oh, well, what's the color? Oh, well, it's a little yellow with a little bit of orange. Like, what does it smell like? Oh, it kind of smells like those popsicles. That's like the creamsicles with the orange, right? And so I think early on in my sort of time with Kim, there was a through his style and questioning, there was a invitation into we need to use all of our inner senses. We need to use all of our inner senses for it to be a rich experience. And yes, cognitive linguistic wholeness, I will take it over distortion and shadow any day. But when we're driving down the street and someone cuts us off, are we in our body and feeling the sense of wholeness? Because we may not be, maybe we're in an active argument with somebody or disagreement. So our linguistic territory and our cognitive territory is somewhat occupied. If I'm in the practice of being in my body, I'll be able to know, oops, I can start to hear the feeling of my voice is shifting into a different dimension, which then opens up a choice point. And I can decide, oh, you know what? Hold on. I still disagree with you, but like I need 35 seconds and I can come back and reorient to a different dimension.
I had this week in relationship with someone in my life who's experiencing a lot of fear, and
Mm.
my heart subtly tipped forward and was like, "Oh, I care about you. Can I support? Can I help?" Very loving place to come from, but it was from a part place.
Yeah.
It was this, and I knew it in the second that it happened because the music turned off. For me,
Uh-huh.
for me, there's jazz, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's a crystalline quality of consciousness that was like, what, where did it go? I feel very
Exactly.
loving, but the
Yeah.
lights went out in a little bit. So um,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why for me it's so important to wed together the inner work of we might to use some common language in like the integral world, cleaning up, transforming shadow, releasing, the burdens that are sort of obscuring, but then wedding that with how we're showing up in the world. So it becomes a showing up practice. Um, it's one thing to work with an inner ecology um, in a meditative environment with, you know, loving candles or a practitioner who, can hold a loving space. It's another one to do it when someone's mad at you, and what I've noticed is that the skills that one develops in doing inner shadow work doesn't automatically translate into how I show up with others. I assumed for a long time that it would have to, but I've noticed it doesn't necessarily. Um, and so it's been important to me to um, create a way of exploration that links these together at some point so that the skills that we're practicing interiorly in a sort of safe context where everything is gentle and there's time. Like, what do we do when the super shuttle guy won't take you and your family, like, because it says it's the wrong super shuttle, and then the next super shuttle comes and they said they're not going to take you either because it's the wrong super shuttle. It's like, at what point do you then learn how to take all of those shadow skills and parts work skills and apply them in the moment so that you don't scream at the super shuttle guy at the top of your lungs? I'm using that example because years ago I didn't have these skills and I screamed. It was like the first time I yelled at anybody. So it's still imprinted in my being. I yelled at the super shuttle guy, like loudly, like it was intense. I thought I was like moving the energy in quotes. And like I wasn't. I was just blowing up at somebody. And I learned a lot from that. I actually found him and sent him an apology letter with chocolate. And he responded. He wrote me a letter back and he accepted my apology. But my point is like, that's an example of like I had done inner work, but I thought at the moment In my mind, I literally was like, oh, it's time to move the energy here. We've been waiting here in the cold after Christmas vacation for like 2 hours. No super shuttle person is taking us home. I'm going to yell now to move the energy. And it was like so dumb. Like by the end, I had actually gotten some detail wrong and was trying to get on the wrong bus. Like that was the problem, and it's like at that time I had done some inner work, but I didn't know how to apply that work to the in the moment when it really matters, when we can create more suffering or not. We can maybe create something else.
Mhm. What I hear as I'm listening to you, Alexander, is, hey, everybody, we're in relationship with everything all the time. Uh, and I just feel this living invitation into relationship with everything all the time.
Yeah. And an awareness around from where am I relating?
Right, right.
I mean, at some uh in terms of some potential, there's a moment where so much of the separation in us has dissolved that our actions are an immediate expression of enlightened intention. But it's probably a really good idea for every single one of us to never assume that that's how we're living. Because most of the time that's not how we experience things, and we falter and we waver, and we still are in a place where we have to make choices around, am I going to open my mouth from wholeness, or am I going to choose a different road? And so I think it's really important to ask those questions so that we can, there's enough pain in the world. We don't need to add to it.
So in challenging moments, ultimately, you're not teaching people tools and techniques for how to show up in challenging moments. You're inviting people to relate with a challenging moment from a place where organically, innately, spontaneously, we might respond with more enlightened conduct.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not describing a dream where like we don't have problems or anything. It's more, what is the vantage point? What is the internal position from which I'm orienting to conflict, whether it's inside of me or inside of others? We can look at this in a phrase that's helpful here is, we can look at a tragic worldview where I'm um, seeing everything through the eyes of tragedy. There's plenty of things that are happening currently in the United States and around the world that we can look and say, that is tragic. What is happening? It's horrible. People are suffering. People are dying. People are being harmed. Like we can look through that view. But then there's also a post-tragic view. And a post-tragic view is one in which we're not dismissing the tragedy. We're not saying that it's fake, but it's a different position from with which we are interacting with what's occurring. And that changes our perspective on what's happening. And it simultaneously acknowledges the very real sort of harm or intensity or violence or conflict or like whatever the thing is, while at the same time rooting in wholeness and seeing that there are deep potentials in that whatever it is that is unfolding. There are deep potentials there. That it's not the thing with the tragic worldview is that often we uh, can fall into a place of loss of heart. There can be a kind of hopelessness. There can be a sense that maybe you could call it a meaning crisis. The tragic worldview, its gift is that it throws us into a meaning crisis, and we get very close to pain and suffering. So it amplifies empathy. But if the crises are too loud, it can also lead to hopelessness, because it's like, these days there's a lot of people that I know that it seems like every day that you wake up, there's more stuff, there's more crises, and they just keep piling and piling and piling and piling. That leads to a heart that doesn't want to get out of bed anymore. Certainly the spirit of activism can be activated, but then also the spirit of hopelessness can be activated. The post-tragic worldview is looking at all the same occurrings in the world, but from wholeness that sees intrinsic positivity, it sees intrinsic possibility, it recognizes mystery, that there's a mystery here. It welcomes polarization. It doesn't try to create polarization, but it recognizes that there's a something that comes from the friction. And so this intrinsic positivity, it's not like positive thinking, like I'm now putting a positive spin onto like something horrible, but rather it's more of seeing that there's an intrinsic positivity that's like a kernel of potential that if nurtured properly will lead to something that we couldn't have seen. So it's not creating tragedy on purpose. It's not seeking it out, nor is it dismissing it. But once it's here, it's like the thunder is storming. So it's able to lean into that in a very vibrant and alive way and surf
Mhm.
in a different way than the tragic sort of sensibilities in us would.
Mhm. Mhm. So the post-tragic worldview is if you look to the essence of anything, you're going to find the essence of anything, even in the essence, very essence of war, at the very essence of pain, at the very essence of suffering is essence itself. And by contacting what is most essential in any of its expressions, it helps it to liberate.
Yeah, so exactly. And one thing I would add is you're dropping into the essence that's the essence of everything, potentially, and then you're riding the explosion from that. So we're not just going into like the transpersonal essence that's the same in everything. That can be one way to ground a post-tragic worldview, but it's not required. Not everybody that can hold a post-tragic orientation, not everybody has access to that depth that you're describing. Somebody might just be recognizing, like, I'm thinking of an example. One of my daughter's teachers, um, we were having a regularly scheduled parent meeting, and Sophia loves to do really well on her tests. This is a math test. She loves to do really well. And she was in a really hard math block. And no matter how hard she was trying, she was not getting the grade that she wanted. And this is unusual for her. Usually, if she wants a 99 or a 97, she'll get it just because she wants to and she works at it. She was working at it, and she wasn't getting good grades with it. And we were talking to the teacher, and he was like, "Well, this might sound weird, um, but I think it's actually a really good thing." And then he went in to talk about all of the things that this is helping her awaken to. Now, he wasn't speaking anyway about a transpersonal essence that's within the essence of everything. Maybe he was experiencing that. That's definitely possible. But he was speaking about it in a way where simply it was there is a struggle here that we could look at as a tragic problem and step into Sophia's sense of this is horrible, end of story. And he was able to see actually there are other potentials here. So while there's a yes to what you said, one option is that we can ride from that ground that you're describing. We can ride the wave into specificity of how is this unique tragedy awakening all of us and requiring us to show up in the grit in a new way.
Mhm.
It's also possible to hold a post-tragic view without that seeing the essence in everything. It helps, but I think that um, we need a post-tragic uh, worldview in this era, and we don't need to have transpersonal awakening in order for that to begin to reveal itself, which is to me really good news. We can deepen into it, and that post-tragic view can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but it's not required in order to begin embodying it in some way, which is a fantastic gift.
So, what is required to begin embodying it in some way?
Yeah, so I think what's required is one, the capacity to consciously form a worldview. So, like a 2-year-old, they're a little bit young developmentally to adopt a worldview consciously and to take a perspective on tragedy. So, I think we have to be developmentally old enough um, to be able to do that. The other is that I think we need to have some access to wholeness. And wholeness has different dimensions of depth to it. So like I can access wholeness and it just means I'm curious. I'm curious about my struggles in life. I'm curious about you. I'm curious about the conversation. So there has to be some access to wholeness. And um, that doesn't require deep awakening. So I think those are at least two. I'm sure we could come up with a bunch, but I think those are at least two. I've seen people with, that um, have access to, they have deep faith and connection to a particular tradition, like a religious tradition or something, um, that has driven them into practice. So they have a direct depth relationship to that particular tradition. And even though from a developmental perspective, we might not say there's um, we wouldn't call it like a later developmental wave, they have incredible depth that has allowed them to look at the world and see the sacredness, even in the pain, because of that depth. And that's the thing I want to point out here is that the post-tragic view is a depth discovery. It's not necessarily like when you go to later stages of development, then all of a sudden the post-tragic is there. I've seen people that would be considered late stage um, individuals and they don't have a post-tragic perspective. They have a lot of complexity. They even have some awakening to some deep states of being. But when you ask them what's going on in the world, there's a very much a tragic worldview is imprinted in their meaning making. And so it's more of a, in terms of the question of what's required, um, it's a depth is required, um, as well as the ability to look at tragedy and take a perspective on it. Um, yeah.
I hear in your transmission today, Alexander, I hear what happens in me is a call to leadership, and it's a different kind of leadership. It's not necessarily the activism leadership that you're speaking about, but it's really the be the change you want to see in the world leadership, and who we're being as we walk through the world is the leadership that I'm hearing you illuminate.
Yeah, because I think that we are in a world now where on social media there's a lot of buzz about views and like who's got more not perspectives, but like who has the most views and like who has all the likes and like but the reality is for eons people have been just being people and doing things. And there's a few famous people throughout history, there's a few people that are somehow remembered and known. But, even if any of us try to think back like 6 generations, we probably can't see their face. Even if we tried, it gets a little blurry. 4 generations, like, do you know your great 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 grandmother? And so at some point we're going to be faceless expressions. Like I probably laugh like my great 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 grandfather, but I don't know that. I don't even know his name. And so it's sort of like yes, we can look at leadership in the context of making big transformational offerings to the world, but then there's what we do every single day. And how does that it doesn't get as much, it doesn't get views and likes, but it is going to live on in the stream of humanity. Maybe somebody will choose to be kind instead of a jerk, in 45 billion years from now. Like we don't know how this is going to show up. And so um, those tender moments that happen all day long in our relationships with the whole world, I think that's where it really matters. And it might matter in a way where like we won't be noticed. Or if we're noticed, it's just a little bit among friends or something. It's not going to be uh, plastered across the cosmic, skyscape. But but it's going to make a difference.
There's something kind of forming over here. I'll just let it be half formed. And what I feel in contact with is the changes that happen for us when we shift from, going for the hoorahs, I'll call them, the big sends, which is beautiful. And I love that.
Yeah.
And there's something here that feels, way more simple, way more mundane, way more human, basic, unseen, unacknowledged. Uh, um, and what happens for us is we become the kind of people who can actually find rich satisfaction and satiation in a unseen, unacknowledged way of
Yeah.
being. Uh, yeah, that's what I'm in touch with right now.
Yeah. I think that the Western mind and Western culture, um, at least the loud notes. Of course, there's nuances. There's not one Western culture, but like the loud notes in this era there's such an individual kind of orientation. And I've seen this in some of my teachers in the past, where the teachers that were embedded in Eastern culture, they grew up there. Somebody would want to, I'm thinking of one teacher of mine, I'm not going to use names, but I'm thinking one teacher of mine, somebody was like, "Oh, this thing that you said was amazing. Like, can I cite you? Can I like credit you?" And he's like, "Well, credit Chinese medicine." Like, what do you mean me? And then, maybe a Western teacher, it's like they really want to be seen as an individual who's achieved something. And both are valid, both are beautiful. I don't have a criticism for one or the other. It's just I think the sort of common Western mindedness these days, it's a lot about being an individual. And that's fantastic. But what's it like to be embedded in a tradition? Whether it's the tradition of being human, like it's all of humanity, or a particular tradition where the individual is less foregrounded and it's more about the collective. And again, both are valuable, but I think it opens up different possibilities around what's important and those moments when love is exchanged where it's like, it's part of something bigger that's holding us or that is us, that expresses itself in so many ways that doesn't exemplify the individual achievement. It's just love touching love, or one simple little note that changes the course of someone's life. We just don't know. I mean, the thing is about unfolding is like we could make one little course correction that looks like it's like one titch, like the second ticks on a clock. It's like just one little second tick. But in 30 years from now, that one little choice becomes vaster and vaster and vaster in terms of how different that road taken is from maybe the direction we were heading. And every little moment counts.
Every little moment counts. Can't change anything without changing everything.
Yeah.
How early, I want to loop back in earlier in the conversation. You said, from one perspective, everything that's ever happened is happening in this moment. I'm holding uh, every moment counts. We can't change
Yeah.
anything without changing everything, and everything that's ever happened is happening in this moment. What happens for you having these three here?
Well, what comes up for me is, I mentioned that each moment is being shaped by everything that has occurred previously. So, what I'm essentially doing, if we get wordy with it, is I'm taking the traditional This is inspired by Ken Wilber. I'm taking the traditional notion of involution and applying it to an evolutionary perspective. So it changes what involution means. That all previous moments are involved into this one. They're involution, it has like a curling gesture. It's a curling. It's like an enfolding. And so it's like all previous occurrences are enfolded in this moment, but that's not the only thing that's happening. The other thing, that's the involutionary gesture. The other thing that's happening is the possibility for novelty, right? This sort of leans into process philosophy, and Whitehead is one of the folks that um, speaks about this kind of stuff. So you have this capacity for novelty. So it's like all previous occurrences, the living history is like the seed bed, the ground of this moment. So it does shape it. It's why I'm not going to turn into a pumpkin. Like there's like 100% chance that I'm not about to turn into a pumpkin because of all the moments that have led up to this one. There's just no predisposition for Alexander to turn into a pumpkin. I'm a person now. And so I'm going to probably stay a person. But at the same time, there's this opening for creative novelty, for emergence. I can say, well, I've been a cigarette smoker for the last 20 years. I haven't been a cigarette smoker for the last 20 years, but let's say I was. I could say, okay, I'm not going to do that again. And I could take a surprising new direction that then gets enfolded into the next moment. So if I was a cigarette smoker for the last 20 years and now I didn't smoke, then tomorrow I have a new living history. It's got an addition. It's got an extra little bit of newness to it. That's why not every moment looks exactly the same, right? And part of one way to hold this is that that creative novelty, there's an allure, there's like a magnetic attraction towards deeper beauty and deeper truth and deeper goodness. And it's like the future that's unborn. It pulls us. It pulls us into this unformed possibility where we can feel the the deeper truth, beauty, and goodness that's sort of wanting to form out of the misty edges.
Mhm.
And then that then becomes the totality of what's poured into the next moment, the little realizations. Yeah.
As you're speaking, I get this visual of a wave curling forward into the sand on the
Hmm.
shore and
Yeah,
simultaneously pulling back into the ocean. There's a involutionary and evolutionary gesture simultaneously.
that's right. Exactly.
The question that comes up for me is, so knowing that, then where the metaphor potentially breaks down is somehow there's this quality of more, there's this quality of fruition, there's this quality of, on a previous podcast episode, you said the universe is a fat, plump, juicy mango that's getting more fat and plump and juicy in every moment. Um, so,
Yeah, that's the creative novelty.
uh, so
There's
that's
a
a part of the evolutionary process.
yeah, yeah. But it's both, right? So there's this new insight, there's this new stretching into or awakening into or being drawn into something new. So the evolutionary sort of discoveries get plumper, but then that makes whatever pours into the next moment or whatever shapes the next moment plumper. And so if we're looking at it from the context of evolution and involution, which we can or we can also not, but if we do, then that's what's occurring there. Things are getting fuller, and there's a degree of um, uh, unknown. Like it's different than everything has already existed and we're just rediscovering it, which is a lot of what we are taught in many of the awakening traditions. And from that perspective, it's true because what they're talking about is awakening to the timeless, boundless ocean of love that didn't, it's unchanging. But if we add in the evolutionary dimension to it, then things are getting fuller and we're not just awakening to what already was. That might be happening too, but there's new creativity that's occurring in fullness that um, is getting fuller and fatter.
Mhm. This is where my mind just can't comprehend what we're saying here because um, yeah, there's we'll call it a determinist worldview where everything that's ever happened or everything that will happen has already happened and we're just living
Yeah.
it. And then maybe we'll call it a Buddhism orientation or an awakening orientation. I'll call it an awakening orientation, is to see through the dimension of reality that changes to the dimension of experience that never changes, the timeless, boundless ocean of awareness as you're speaking about. And then there's this dynamic with time, right? There's this dynamic with time where um, from one perspective, all of space and time can exist as a little kernel inside this vast ocean of awareness. And of course, there can be an unfathomable number of those. We'll just call them, neurons in the sea of awareness, or maybe the multiverse could be another term for this neural network of potentials. And then there's the um, there's a thing that I just don't get right in this place, and the mind's not going to get it. I'm with that, uh, but it's as you mentioned earlier, as the luminous quality moves through the scarf, as the radiant ocean is permeating through all the kernels of space and time, they're becoming more fat and plump and juicy, and I'm hitting a I'm hitting a
Yeah.
washout.
So, I mean, I think, my sense of it is that there are many valid ways of trying to understand the mystery that we are. And, the deterministic views that you mentioned, there's a lot of beauty and value in that. It provides a kind of stability, um, which can be really important for a human being at the right time. And that perspective co-arises with a world that does indeed um, exist that way. And then we can look at, an awakening perspective, like you mentioned, that says, well, maybe all of that mind stuff is really just empty, and really we need to awaken to the underlying ground, and that's what's most important. And there's a lot of value in that too, and that gives rise to a different kind of experience of what's real. And then these other dimensions you're describing, I was describing like an involutionary kind of approach to what's happening here. And again, it may seem different or even contradictory to some other view, but it is um, simply another lens through which a different sort of orientation to becoming or what we are comes forward. And so they don't all line up because we've got, like, lots of multiverses, like as you put it, or to put it in the context of, being a person here on Earth, it's like we have as many different perspectives and realities as we do people. And they're all very real. And we can look from one view and say, well, yours isn't real, mine's more real. It's like it's really more like this and really less like that. But what I appreciate is the possibility for this kind of perspectival fluidity where um, they don't all line up. They don't necessarily fit into one neat and tidy thing, but um, they both produce a different feeling tone and a different reality that we can walk into. And, um, we could just as easily drop everything I said about involution and evolution and just drop into something else. But what I'm curious about is what does it do for us as people? What does it awaken in our heart to consider any of those examples you gave, those perspectival examples? I think for me, like when my father died, having a more stable perspective was really, really helpful. Where, like I was a little or a lot more certain and feeling like everything was sort of destined. That really appealed to me because it helped me get on the ground and kind of like, okay, well, it helped me heal. It gave me space to kind of, I don't like walking on mud typically. Like I'd prefer to walk on grass. And it was a time in my life where really having solid ground was better. And so if I were to hold a viewpoint like everything is predetermined, that felt really good. It was really helpful. But other things have been really helpful too, like being an unfolding mystery where there's, the ground is groundless, and yeah.
Curious, I know for anyone who doesn't know, Alexander and I did a podcast here a couple of years ago where we spoke about losing our fathers early in life, and I don't remember exactly what we got into on that episode. It's been a couple of years, but I know you were sharing about the connections you were having with Herbert is his name, the
Yeah.
the man who
Mhm.
killed your father.
Yeah.
Are you two still connecting?
Yeah. So we met, I guess it's been maybe 3 years ago. We met for about 3 hours. That was our first conversation. So in case people don't have the backstory, so about 30, little less 30 years ago, 1998, my father was murdered and there were three men involved and a fourth who was kind of um, he planned it all. He hired them. He wasn't there at the scene, but he was the leader of the whole thing. Um, all the men were caught and put in prison. Um, so Herbert was the one who actually pulled the trigger, and we had a restorative justice conversation. And then we've probably met about 8 times since then, over the last 3 years, um, and just sort of deepened our relationship. Part of that is just maintaining a relationship. Sometimes the conversations dip deeper. Sometimes they're a little more, hi, how's it going? What's going on with you? What's going on with you? Um, so yeah,
These are in person or over the phone?
these are on Zoom. So the first call, the 3 hour call, Herbert, of course, we didn't know each other. And one of his concerns was that, his upbringing was very violent. The things that he saw and witnessed at a very young age, all the way through his life, were just, we probably just couldn't even imagine it. So he knows a world of violence. So in his mind, anybody that he would meet for a conversation like this would want to attack him instantly. So he was concerned that if we were in the same place, that I would try to kill him and then he'd have to hurt me or we'd hurt each other or something like that. So his request was that we would do the first conversation on Zoom for that reason. That worked really well for me because I tend to feel things really, really intensely and very fully. And having this conversation, as you can imagine, was intense enough. Um, walking into the prison and feeling everything that's going on in the prison and all of the subtle dynamics and the feeling of the metal bars and the intensity of just the vibe in the walls, like it would have been a lot for my system. I would have been able to do it, but um, having it on Zoom allowed me to do it from my home and to be in the place where I meditate for hours every day and sit in the same chair. And because, my deeper purpose in this conversation was to show Herbert love and to show the world that love can be possible even when something like this happens. And so I think that being able to do it at home, it helped me be a little more connected to, you know, we've spent a lot of time in this home and a lot of meditation and a lot of love and a lot of good relationships and kindness. And, it lives in the walls. And, and yeah.
As I'm listening to you, Alexander, I get for me, I come into contact with this flame in my heart that you invited us into in the beginning, and it feels like as you're sharing about Herbert and these connections, this is actually living from the flame in the heart and allowing the flame in the heart to contact whatever it is that pours through, whether that's, obviously we talked about shadow and internal collectives earlier. This really is an expression of our air quotes outer world or our external world contacting the flame in the heart.
Well, and it feels to me like there's a future that wants to be born. No, I don't mean a future like off in the distance. I'm not talking about like some thing that already exists. I mean, my experience with Herbert is that there's a future that is wanting to be born through us. That sort of, it's hard to put into words. I don't mean to make it seem like there's some like hand of like eternal authority that is like doing a thing. I don't mean it like that. It's the things that happened with Herbert and my father and myself were very painful. And for the large part, like it impacted me and my family, and like it was on the news at the time, and like some people remember it. But, this was in 1998. There's some people that would never feel the texture of all of the things that occurred from that one day, that one moment. And there's a way in which these conversations with Herbert and what this has made possible in terms of like my own writing and the book that I'm working on. It's opening up a doorway that's giving birth to a world that most people don't see. And by that, what I mean is they don't see it because there's simply just no proximity to it. They didn't know my dad. They weren't in the circle. Like that's what I mean. And so it's a way to draw out the intricacies of pain and beauty that I didn't even know were there. As I go further into the writing process, it's like there's so many latent experiences there's so much beauty and depth that I didn't feel until I went in to write about it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so precious. And so all of this to say, I'm kind of wandering around because it's hard to articulate, but it feels like there's a future that's sort of being coaxed out, or there's a potential that's being coaxed out that feels beyond me and beyond Herbert and beyond like any individual. It's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm on the edge of trying to describe something that's a feeling and hard to put into language.
There's been an impulse over here for probably at least 30 minutes. I'm not tracking time very well right now, but there's been an impulse over here just building and building and building, which I've never asked on the podcast before, but I'll just trust it and ask you, which is if you had a microphone right now and could speak to the 8 billion human beings on planet Earth, if this podcast was something that everybody was tuning into, what what would you say?
I begin by asking everyone to sit down for a moment and just be quiet and just feel the sacred hush. And then maybe I would say something about um, I would invite people to get quiet enough to feel that there's a love there that's so much that burns through all that pain. But most importantly, the invitation would be to just be quiet for just a few moments and drop into the stillness and the love and all those thoughts that are rushing around in your head. There's something else here. And all that pain that torments you, there's so much love here. And I know it's hard, but if we can just get quiet long enough to just let the pain drop us into love instead of warfare, I guess I would start there. I might invite people to hold hands with someone nearby, even if they were fighting, and just feel the sensation of the touch and the preciousness in that. And I might remind people that their breaths are numbered, not in like a fate kind of way, but like things are going to come to an end. So far, until we found the technology to make humans live forever, this is coming to an end. So what matters? What really matters? And I would try and find a way to ask that question in a way that didn't embolden our shadows, but in a way that helped us feel some, maybe just a glimpse of tenderness. I don't know, man. That's where I'd probably start. I mean, sheesh, 8 billion people. It's hard to know what would be meaningful to everyone. It's hard to know what would land as meaningful to everyone. But yeah.
Really beautiful impact on at least one person. Thank you.
Yeah. It's like I would just want to put my hand on everybody's back for a minute. It's like, could we just have a moment of silence? Like 8 billion, like just one moment of silence, and just feel a loving hand on our back. And just to hear for a minute, like, I don't even know what to say. I don't want to say everything's going to be okay because that's not necessarily true or what someone needs, but to just feel that loving presence. I think there's so much isolation in this world. And there's maybe I wish for a place in which people could feel a little bit less of that.
There's some parallels happening that I haven't actually quite tracked before. Obviously, I know you and I both lost our fathers at an early age. You've got the Lumina process. I have a company called Luminous Labs.
Uh-huh.
You have a Instagram called Our Beautiful Future. I've got a global community called Our Emerging Future.
That's so funny. I have that Instagram thing because they didn't have Alexander Love. It was years ago. I was like, all right, I guess our beautiful future works.
There's something right here at this point with you sharing in the way that you are where I don't feel so alone.
Yeah,
I feel connected. In this moment with you, I feel connected actually at a kind of human to human level. Of course, there's more
yeah,
universal connection things.
yeah,
But I feel profoundly the loving presence that you're speaking about
yeah.
going through you.
And to me, that's where, I find it was actually, I think it was Tucker Walsh who initially pointed me to the post-tragic phrase. There's something that either he had written or he sent something to me. And to me, there's something so important in this because that human to human connection you're describing, and of course there's the wider love also. But I think there's something about not dismissing pain and not dismissing the incredible darkness that a lot of the human population goes through on a daily basis. There's a way in being able to lean into that wholeheartedly without from a place that doesn't flinch. It somehow allows the places in us that do flinch to be infused with courage, to stay. Donna Haraway has a book called Staying with the Trouble, like to be able to stay with the trouble. And I feel like there's something moving in that. And it's like one of the things that I'm trying to do in this book that I'm writing is really evoke the beauty within pain. It's like taking the stories that I experienced with losing my dad and turning them into something beautiful that in no way turns away from the darkness and the sadness and the loss and the horror and all that. I think it brings, I'm saying all this because, as I'm here with you, I feel this human connection and also this big, deep radiance of loving presence. And somehow there's like they're coexisting in the same as one experience that in somehow includes the tears, but also the sun drops. Um, occupying the exact same space.
Yeah, it's the words that come to me are it's not trying to get somewhere. It's welcoming and including more of what's here.
Yeah. I think it's something that I not I think I appreciate this about soulful artists, that there's the agony and torment, and then there's what comes next, which is to engage in a creative process with the agony and torment that invites the world to just look a little closer, because many of us have so much privilege that we can look away and not know we really looked away. Like we can kind of see something dark over there and have a twinge of like, oh, it's really bad over there in that country, or it's really bad over there in that neighborhood, or but then we can go and get pizza and kind of forget about it and listen to music. And there's something about, soulful art that is dealing with darkness that, because it transforms the torment and agony into something beautiful, we can't turn away as quickly. It's too compelling. And so then we have to stay with the trouble a little bit and stay with our reactions to it and stay with what it stirs in us. And maybe it then provokes a deepening into beauty and darkness, or the beauty that exists within tragedy. Maybe another word, beauty, maybe is a loaded word. It helps us touch the soul of human experience that's sacred. Maybe that might land a little more closely to what I'm trying to say.
So here, but more so experience in the moment is that we are the beauty, and this invitation allows us to come into contact with the pain from the beauty.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I like to call I like to think of what we're doing here as humans, is we're walking through the sacred gap. And this is the gap that allows a knower to witness something. And there are a couple animals that can do this in some ways, but humans have really taken it and run with it. This ability to uh, look at things and take perspectives on things. But often this sacred gap um, is experienced more as the separation that comes along with it, and we fall under the spell of fracture and believe that we're broken. And I think there's a possibility here of awakening to the sacred gap in such a way that it's it's um it's a fuller relationship to, yes, this gap between knower and known creates all of our suffering. It creates all the wars, all the marriages, all the ecstasies. It creates all of that. And yes, there's a lot of pain associated with it, but there's also something just so precious that we can look at the world and say, what am I? What are we? What is this? And we can continue to write this human story. And that in this returning, to the sacred gap, there's the possibility for realizing that it's not that we're trying to get rid of all the pain and like that's the point. It's like sometimes I'll have clients where they don't say it necessarily out loud, but the implicit assumption is like, let's do this thing so that all the pain is gone, and then I'll finally be back to the way things were supposed to be. But I think if we, right, I mean, yeah, exactly. My 20s and 30s, right. But actually, maybe the sacred gap, maybe that's part of the point. Like that's what we're here doing. We're here learning how to interface with all the stuff we can notice and seeing what does that open in us? What does that awaken in us? And it's painful and sometimes it really sucks. But it seems like there's probably something bigger than that too. That there's some deeper story that we're writing and there's something really precious in that. And it's what allows me to look at someone and say, I love you. And they look back and say, I love you too. And then we cry together. And that's a gift that we only have when this sacred gap has opened, at least in a conscious way.
Looks like we're coming to a pause point here
Yeah.
to end on, or not end, but some other word.
Yeah. I'm just feeling a lot of love for you and for us as human beings. And one of the things that has one of the gifts of my father dying so young has been the recognition that um, there's a sort of delicateness to this thing of living. And I try to never forget that. I do forget that sometimes, but I try to remember that this could be my last day. And that when I remember that, it motivates me to try to really connect with what's most important because that's the legacy we leave behind, you know? It's our actions, it's what we choose to do with each other. That's what we leave behind when we go wherever we go. And you know, for me, that's just it's such a gift to remember death regularly, not in a morbid way, but just in a this could be it. So what do we say to everybody? I actually find it to be a sometimes I'll I'll lean into this as a practice where it's like we're having this conversation and the practice is okay, like what are we're going to be done in like 4 minutes? It's like, well, what if this is it? The last things that I say, the last things that you say. And for me, it just changes the choices that I make. Yeah.
I live this so deeply in my own life. I feel um, seen as you're speaking, you know. I mean, it really got kicked online for me eulogizing my father at his funeral. I just looked over at his casket and I went, my God, I'm gonna die also. And
Yeah.
it evokes something that's it, you know, you could call it panic. It's not really the right word. You could call it urgency. It's not the right word. I mean, it's not those things, but it's something, you know, I used to say right fucking here, right fucking now.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
not leaving things unsaid. And
Yeah.
leaving it
Yeah.
for the moment.
I, yeah. Yeah. For me, it leads to a, like, in some contexts, it just leads to giving everything to the moment, to not waste time. I mean, it's something that I notice in my aunt who's like, 95. And it's like, there for at least a decade now, there, probably longer, there's been a sort of place in her where it's like, don't just do everything. Like, do the things that are really important, right? Because she's old enough that it's right there. And then when I'm with human beings and I'm interacting with human beings and I remember, it leads me to be closer, yeah, to cut through the bullshit. I mean, we are so good at getting pissed off and upside down about the dumbest stuff. Like, if I just speak plainly, on behalf of all of us. And there's just something like, you know, there's nothing like the recognition of death to cut through the nonsense and just be like, you know what? Forget all that shit. I love you.
If this was our last conversation, Alexander, I would want to just say thank you. That would be the biggest thing I'd want to say. Um, I'm just so grateful for um, the impact you've had on me and the gift you've been in my life and continue to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you're a gift, Forrest. You have such a brilliant light, and yeah, you remind me of some kind of a like a like a bright yellow flower that's just radiating into the world. And yeah, thank you for for bringing that forward, as well as all of the other nuances that you have access to. Yeah.
Sudden noticing the bright yellow flower next to your head in the photo.
Oh yeah, there you are.
I make up you got a little bit more. Is that true?
I don't think so. Anytime I have the chance to uh, end on a uplifting note, inviting people to love each other because they're going to die soon, I always feel like that's a good completion point.
When I said more, by the way, I wasn't saying more for me. I was just saying more in general.
No, I got
Feel like about how
that.
awesome I was, and just keep
That would have been fantastic. Yeah. Be like, wait, if this is really it, man, isn't there more you want to tell me about myself?
Okay, that's all you got. I'm about to be out of here.
No, I understood what you were saying.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, if you're still here with us, I just want to thank you for being a part of the journey. And again, just inviting you to check out Alexander's offering getting started in April. Even inviting you to share it with someone that you know might resonate with it and want to hear more about it.
Yeah.
Um,
You can we can put a link somewhere, and also it's easy to find on the Newfield Network's website, which is newfieldnetwork.com. Um, I teach most of the things that I do through Newfield. Um, but we can also put a link down so people can find it.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes. It'll be in the show notes everywhere it gets posted. So thanks, Alexander. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
man. Thanks, everyone.